Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to share all of these great tips and techniques with you all today. And today we're going to be focusing specifically on work-life balance for leaders. And this is a topic that comes up basically every single day with my clients. It's my most talked about or coaching topic that comes up. And there's just so many nuggets that I've wanted to share. So I'm excited for you all to get all of these tips today. And I know there was a lot of people, obviously this comes up with my clients a lot. There's a lot of people that signed up today. So this is top of mind for so many people. And when I was doing a little bit of research on this stat really hit home, I think, what's going on of why work-life balance is so important. And that is 41% of employees experience high levels of stress on I had to pop up, we're good. High levels of stress on a daily basis. And I think this is the core of it, of why this is so important. And that is that maybe in the past, high stress used to be something that kind of ebb and flow with our day to day as things came up or as we were in our busy season at work. But now globally, it seems like this is just something that's creeping up every single day for people and sticking. It's becoming more consistent. So all of these tips and techniques really get to that root of our day-to-day lives, our day-to-day work, and techniques that can help you on a daily basis and not just these one-off areas. So what we're going to be covering today, my three main topics today are sustainable leadership practices, realistic routines, and draining habits. And once we go through all three of those, then we will, again, at the second half, have some time to really customize a plan for you based on these three themes. And then again, I'll save some time at the end, probably at least 10-15 minutes for some Q&A for you all to share what you're going to be working on and even maybe learning some new ideas from each other as well. And if you haven't heard, all of these topics we're going to be covering today are really actually coming from my first season of my podcast, the Hello Velocity podcast that I launched a few months ago. So it's been a really interesting journey. This was something that going into it, I'd planned, 12 specific topics that I thought would be really relevant for everyone. But then as I started recording, I thought about the topics that were coming up over and over again with my clients, and I just started recording based on that. So I kind of threw away my plan and I went with just what was coming up organically in conversations. And then as I recorded a topic, I thought, oh, wait, I covered this, but now let's go a little bit deeper and look at it from this other angle, or this would be the next natural progression of what would come up with a client digging into this. So there's a lot obviously covered today. I'm going through 9 specific topics for you. And I thought this would be helpful for anyone who does listen to the podcast. This is essentially, how do you bring that to life, right? I want this to be that space for you to really stop and think and learn and apply it to yourself, because I know a lot of times when we are listening to podcasts, we're going for a walk, we're working out, we're doing dishes, we're not really in a space to stop and write things down or really apply it to our everyday. So I want this to be that space for you. But then on the other hand, if you haven't heard the podcast, you haven't listened to it, you're not a podcast person, whatever it is, that's totally okay too. Totally respect that. But I want this to then be, this new learning opportunity for you, right? And I will, you might have noticed if you saw it in the worksheet, I did link the podcast episodes for each topic, so that if you choose one that's really resonating with you and you want to go deeper, you can listen, you can watch on YouTube, whatever makes the most sense for you, so you can dig into it even more. So essentially today is a high-level overview of 9 of my favorite topics from the podcast that I'm going to give the high-level overview to, and you can go back through and listen and learn even more in the actual episodes. So I kind of mentioned this already, but essentially what we'll go through today is 3 different sections, each with 3 different topics within them. And I want you, at the end of each topic, I'll give you a few minutes to think about which topic, or at the end of each section, I want you to think about which topic you really want to focus in on, which would make the most impact for you. And then we will map these out in our plan at the end. And then again, you can go back at the end to listen to the podcast episode to get even more ideas, more examples. I go into a lot more examples in the podcast episodes as well to give you new ideas. Okay, a lot of backstory, a lot of setting us up. So let's get us started. And I know we have more people coming in the chat. or in the group. So does everyone have our worksheet that went out? And feel free to share in the chat. Yes, I'm going to put the link in the chat again before I get started, since I think most people that are planning to join are here now. Okay, so you have that to follow along. Either it will make a automatic copy on Google Docs so that you can edit it and it's private to you. No one else will be seeing what you're writing in, but I want to make sure everyone has that before we get started. Okay, our first topic here for work-life balance is sustainable leadership practices. Here we're looking at redefining work-life balance, embracing change, and prioritizing your well-being. First off, with redefining work-life balance, what I've seen a lot when people are talking about work-life balance, and I know even the term, people are kind of hit or miss with it right now, and whatever term you want to use in place of that, I just know that's what most people know it as right now. Most people, how we're thinking about this is really setting ourselves up for failure, to be honest with you. Even thinking about how we usually look at it is that we are trying to kind of solve a puzzle that if we just get everything right in our work, in our life, there's some sort of puzzle where everything can be perfect all the time, right? We can somehow be able to give 100% at work, 100% at life every day, and we'll just have figured it out. And it's almost like we're waiting for that to click. That's how I see a lot of people look at it. I know I used to be in that boat too. And it's just not realistic. This is not how life works. This is not how work works. Things are constantly changing, and we need to be ready for that. We need to be open to that. And sometimes, honestly, we don't have 100% to give, and that's okay, right? So if maybe we're not feeling great that day, maybe something big is going on in our personal life, or someone is sick in our family, you're not going to have 100% to give to your work, and that's okay. So if you only have 70% to give and you give 70% that day, that's still 100%, right? So try to think about how to shift your mindset with work-life balance and how you want it to work for you, how you want to make it easier for you, more approachable for you, and giving yourself some grace. So some specific techniques that will help you do that. First of all, prioritizing effectively is number one. This comes up basically with every single client, almost every session that we're talking, is what is most important, what is most urgent, what are those deadlines? Because also with work-life balance, we're always even thinking about the metaphor about work-life balance is always, we have all these plates in the air, right? Or we have a lot on our plate. It's always about getting more and more, and you're balancing more. But how do we prioritize those and not just take on more and more and more? Maybe some plates we need to set down, maybe some we need to give to other people, we need to put in a backpack and keep with us until later. Think about which is most important, looking at deadlines, looking at urgency, looking at importance, and not just, I need to do all the things right now. And another way you can do that is setting boundaries so that you know when to say no. And actually, a few of my clients even just needed to put alarms on their phones for the end of the workday so that they could get out of work in time to be home with their families, to have dinner with their families, things like that. Because sometimes we're always just so busy with work, it's always going to be there. And sometimes we get carried away and we just keep going and going and going. And sometimes we just need to put those boundaries in ourselves to be able to have that balance that we need and that we want. And then, of course, asking for help. This is probably something I'm going to bring up several times today. This is super important. And especially for women, it can be really hard for us. And a lot of times people think that asking for help somehow is a weakness, but really, it's really brave to ask for help. It takes a lot of strength to ask for help. And it's something we all need to do, right? We don't have to do all of this ourselves. And even when it comes to our home life, right? If you're going to have a really busy work week, maybe asking your partner or someone else in your family, like, hey, can you take the lead on dinner this week? Or I'm going to be an all-day meeting on Wednesday. I'm not going to get home till late. Like, we need to plan ahead of time for dinner. Just simple things like that, asking for help and delegating at work, especially. Same idea. You don't have to take it all on yourself. Next is embracing change. This is one that very naturally came up after the work-life balance topic of this is where I see most people struggling with work-life balance, because again, in a perfect world, we think that everything can come together so perfectly if all of our cards are in the right place and everything's going to according to plan, but we all know that change is inevitable. So we need to be open to being flexible. We need to be adaptable. And my favorite technique here is adding a shit ton of wiggle room to your deadlines and schedule. And especially for high performing people, we always want to say yes to everything. We always think, yeah, I can do that this week. Oh, it won't take me that long to do it. I'll just get to it right now. But think about anytime you're committing to something, excuse me, even adding what I refer to as wiggle room is maybe 10 to 20% longer than you expect it to take. Give yourself that wiggle room because, again, life is going to change. Things are going to come up. Other projects are going to pop up. You're going to have to edit things along the way, and just be ready for that. Give yourself that room to know that things are going to change and have the space in your deadline, in your commitment, but then also in your schedule, right? We need to have some wiggle room for those things that are inevitably going to come up. So don't book yourself 100% in your schedule. Try to give yourself extra blocks of time that are just open block time for you to focus on things that come up along the way and not be overcommitted and taking all of your time. And then another really easy technique you can use is when you are committing to something new, just ask yourself, is this a realistic timeline? Or is this a realistic deadline? It gives you that kind of gut check in the moment, just to pause before you give an automatic answer. Because a lot of times people just automatically say, yes, I can do it when someone gives you a timeline, or you just have a knee-jerk reaction of, yeah, I can get it to you end of day. Yeah, I can get it to you end of week. You just say that because that's automatic, but really just stop and think, maybe look at your schedule. Is that realistic with everything else going on, with all your other meetings, with all the other commitments that you have? Think through it before you commit. And this is one of those simple things. And a lot of these today, you'll probably notice this is just things that we're doing ourselves that are making our work-life balance harder than it needs to be. So have these little gut checks for yourself throughout the day to make it easier on you. And then, as always, be willing to let go of things that aren't in your control. This is kind of the root of being flexible and adaptable, is again, knowing that change is inevitable and things aren't always going to go according to plan. Things aren't going to stay perfect forever. It's not realistic to think that there's one specific way that work-life balance will happen. So we need to be adaptable and let go of things as new things happen as well. All right, last in this section is prioritizing your well-being. Here, we want to be focused on our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health to improve your performance at work and at home. And you'll see this is one of those where a lot of times people think that when they're so busy, they don't have time for this, right? And they think it's something you can only do when you have enough time to invest in your well-being. But I've found that this is the number one thing you need to do before anything else. And it's almost, I like the saying, slow down to speed up, is that we need to slow down and fill our own cups before we can pour into other people's cups. So this is that idea. And again, the podcast episode goes into all of these different angles more specifically of what that means and how you can do that. But think about all these for you. Maybe which one are you missing? Which one do you need to be focused on more? And how you can focus on this more consistently. So first technique is thinking about checking in with your well-being throughout the day and week. Because again, I see all the time, most of us, we're working for the weekend, right? We just grind it out all week. And then once the weekend hits, oh, okay, now I can relax. Now I can think about myself. Now I can take care of myself. But what if you actually thought about yourself every day of the week, not just on weekends? And what about throughout the day? Because again, when you're grinding it out for 8-10 hours a day, you're not taking care of yourself. You're not breathing and like filling your own cup, but even just taking deep breaths throughout the day can be a nice way to check in with yourself. And starting your day with one specific activity to fill your own cup every single morning is huge. And we'll go into morning routines soon. But we want to be filling our own cup. We want to energize ourselves. And these are those specific ways that we can be doing that every single day, more specifically. And then another angle on the other side is looking at what are those activities that are draining your energy so that you can plan accordingly instead of just letting your energy drain all throughout the week and you have nothing left by the weekend or by the end of the day. So if it's a big presentation you have, maybe you're blocking time beforehand to prep, but then also blocking your calendar so other people aren't piling on meetings before you're going into a big meeting. And then even after that big presentation, maybe you block an hour or two just to decompress, just to, again, not be rushing off to another meeting, just have time to take a few deep breaths, right? Reflect on what worked, what didn't work, whatever it is for you. Think about how you can protect your energy as much as possible and do it proactively by blocking your calendar. Okay, again, these are a lot of tips, super high level. I'm going through these very quickly, but let's take 2 minutes here. On page 1 of the handout, there's a box at the bottom of page 1. Fill out which of these 3 main topics would have the most impact for you on your work-life balance and why. The first one was redefining work-life balance. Second was embracing change. And then third was prioritizing your well-being. So I'll give you about 2 minutes here to fill this out, and feel free to drop it in the chat as well. I'm dropping the link again for anyone that joined a little bit late. All right, we have redefining work-life balance, asking for help, and delegating to maintain priorities over time. Yes, those are huge. Well-being. Ooh, lots of well-beings coming through. Definitely understand. And again, you are not alone. This is like the number one thing I see with clients, is that we all tend to think, especially as leaders, we tend to think, oh, it's all about everyone else. We need to take care of everyone else in our work, in our life. But we have to be able to take care of ourselves first so that we have the energy to take care of everyone else too. And to do it without being snippy and stressed and weighing on ourselves, of course. Prioritizing well-being throughout the day, every day. I have more energy when I slow down, I can speed up. Yes, right? It's so interesting, and it sounds counterproductive or counterintuitive to slow down so you can speed up, but it's so helpful. And Seth said, adding more wiggle room and extending deadlines longer than you think you'll need to your schedule. Yes, that's my favorite. All right, thank you all for sharing. Let's go to our next section here. Routines for greater productivity. Here we're gonna dive deeper into morning routine, and then building habits that stick and breaking up with bad habits. And again, remember at the beginning, we talked about how stress is at this all-time high on a daily basis. These are the things that really break it down into what we need to be doing on a daily basis to be successful. So designing your morning routine. This is another term that, I don't know, I kind of have a strange relationship, right? Because a lot of times when people are talking about morning routines, they are so rigid and they become something that stresses us out more than it does help us. Or there's all these gurus out there that talk about getting up at 4 a.m. and do 5 hours of all the things that they think they need to be doing, and they try to tell everyone else to do that. And obviously that's not realistic. So I want morning routines to be something that are valuable for you, flexible for you, but also something that you're not like weaponizing against yourself. Because I see that a lot of, we have these great ideas for a morning routine, and then when we can't do it, we beat ourselves up about it. And then it's so counterproductive in that it's going to drain our energy instead of help us. So what I think is most helpful is starting with just a few simple, quick ideas of activities. And again, it's not just what, I don't know, some guru is doing every day, all day, ice baths and all the things. It's what are those little things that are super simple, as in approachable for you, that you can do anywhere and really quick. Maybe it's something that's even in 5 minutes you could do. And of course, there's a million ideas out there, some things that I do. And again, think what works best for you. But meditating, different kinds of workouts, and having different ones to choose from potentially, whether it's something, for me, I love to walk in the morning, but then I also have a backup if it's raining outside and I can't get my walk in, or I don't want to walk in the rain. I go on my indoor bike, right? What are some different options, and kind of give yourself backup options as well. Maybe it's reading, maybe it's just, sitting in quiet, drinking your coffee, your tea. What are those really simple things you can do basically anywhere in a matter of just 5 minutes? And then we also need to think about how to adjust our evenings and mornings to be supportive of this. I see this a lot with my clients too, is that we'll get these great plans for morning routines, and then the next time we chat, it's already, a week or two later, and their morning routine is already thrown off because of something happening maybe in the evening, or, their kid's sick, or their kid's at camp this week instead of at school, and their schedule is thrown off. So what do we need to do when it comes to a morning routine that can be supportive in the evening? So you almost need an evening routine in order to have a morning routine as well. So if you do want to be getting up at 5:30 or 6:30, whatever it is for you, for some sort of morning routine, what time do you need to be asleep? What time do you need to be in bed? What time do you need to be getting ready for bed? Like, start actually backing into that, because a lot of times we are only thinking about the morning and not how our evening is going to impact the next day. So how are you going to set yourself up the night before? And then even in the mornings, do you need some sort of boundaries with your family, with your kids, of, hey, mommy needs her 5 minutes in the morning. After you eat breakfast, I'm going to go sit over here in silence with my coffee. And that's mommy's special quiet time. And that's okay, right? And like, get them on board with it too. So it is actually going to happen, right? And set yourself up for success, and get other people excited for you too, right? Everyone wants you to be in a great headspace and wants you to have a great day. So whatever they can do to support you, I'm sure your family will be on board with too. And then, as always, how can you be flexible as change happens? Because that's the number one way this gets thrown off is, maybe you're going on vacation, you have a work trip, again, something with your kids' schedule changes. So how can it be flexible, where it's either, if you have 5 minutes that morning, you can do one thing for 5 minutes, or if you have an hour that day, you can do 2 or 3 activities that day. So that's why I like to have a list of activities to choose from. And I like to just kind of check in with myself that morning, depending on the day. Sometimes I have really early morning meetings, so I can't do, a full hour walk or anything. So I'll do maybe a 10-minute walk or something shorter, or I can do a 5-minute meditation, right? I can do something super quick, just right away, fill your cup so that you can have more energy for yourself throughout the day. All right, and then we have building habits that stick. This is one of those, obviously super related. A lot of these things we've already talked about are habits and working on building our habits. But what I see is that most of us fall into these, say, common tendencies that make habits really hard for us. So what I see most of the time is the all or nothing mentality when it comes to starting a new habit or goal, where, especially the gym example, this is the perfect one of, in January, you are ready to get back to the gym. It's been maybe a few months, a few years, maybe you've never been in the gym, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym every day before work at 5:30. I'm going to be there for an hour. Okay, that sounds great in theory, and sure, plenty of people do that. But if you're going from literally nothing to 100%, you're just setting yourself up for failure. So we maybe think about it in different intervals, like 10, 20, 30%, working yourself up to that. So it could be, okay, I'm going to go twice a week for the first few weeks. I'm going to go for half an hour or an hour, whatever it is. But give yourself grace, because even think about when you're getting back to the gym, you're going to be sore for a few days. Like, you're not going to be able to go every day for a week. physically that won't happen. So think about how to any of these habits you're trying to add into your day to day, how do you make them really approachable, really easy, really bite sized for you so that you can actually sustain them and not fall off the bandwagon immediately and struggle to get back on. And then we want to keep our habits top of mind because a lot of times I see people just setting it and forgetting it, where they have this great idea, especially at the beginning of the year or whenever you're doing some sort of goal setting. And I'm going to do all these things. And then I don't know, 2-3 weeks later, you already forgot what that was. So maybe you need Post-its all around your house, around your office. Maybe you need reminders on your calendar, alarms on your phone. What are the things that you can do to really keep us top of mind? And another thing that I see people struggle with their habits and goals is that they're choosing these based on external pressures instead of their internal motivation. So any of these habits that you've been thinking about to help with your work-life balance, are they things that you actually want, or are they just things that other people talk about that sound good? Like again, the guru with the morning routine that's 5 hours long. Is that just something you heard on TikTok or saw someone else talking about, but it's not actually for you and it doesn't actually make sense for you? I see this too with even meditation. I mentioned that I like to meditate. It's not for everyone. Some people hate it, right? They don't want to sit in silence. And that's okay. If you hate it, don't do it or find a different variation. Maybe it's a guided meditation instead. That's something I do instead of sitting in silence. I love my guided meditations. You could also do a walking meditation where you're just walking and listening to the birds chirping, and that can be meditation. So find what works best for you and don't just force yourself to do something that other people are doing. And lastly, we have breaking up with bad habits. Here, I see a lot of people, most people know what their bad habits are, but we struggle with how to break up with them because we need to just sit with it a little bit more to understand it more. And what I always recommend starting with is identifying what the trigger is for that bad habit. Usually it's an emotion or action-based trigger. So emotional trigger would be like the image here of the maybe junk food eating is, okay, if I had a bad day, like I'm going to go to food for comfort, or if I had a good day, I might go to food for comfort. I'm guilty of this one for sure. Or maybe it's an action-based trigger of, I'm staying up late because I'm binging a new Netflix show, right? And I'm super excited about it. So identify what that one trigger or multiple triggers are for that one bad habit to kind of back into thinking about all the different times that it happens and what's causing it. And then in order to start to break up with it, think about both the short and long-term motivations for quitting it. Because a lot of times we're addicted to these habits because it's giving us some quick kind of dopamine hit in the moment. Like there's something in that moment that's just so good that has you kind of addicted to it, right? So think about what would be the beneficial short-term, long-term for not doing it. So again, junk food, sure, in the moment it tastes really good, but I know for me in 30 minutes, my stomach's really going to hurt if I'm eating all these donuts and pizza. That's motivation for me. And then thinking long-term, if I keep eating like that, I'm going to gain a bunch of weight over the long term. And I know that's not worth it. So kind of breaking it down both ways is really helpful for you in that moment to say, maybe it's not worth it. Maybe just one donut, maybe not a whole plate like this. And then having a specific plan or support structure, of course, help you follow through. So something like an accountability buddy would be great here for breaking up with bad habits. Or is it just not bringing the food home or food into your home to begin with, or hiding it in the house where you don't see it? Can be really helpful. Something as simple as that. All right. Next, on page 2 of the handout, like we did earlier, spend 2 minutes here choosing which of these 3 topics would be most impactful for your work-life balance and why. So first was designing your morning routine, building habits that stick, and breaking up with bad habits. And again, feel free to drop in the chat as well. All right, building habits that stick, adjust your evening to help your morning, breaking up with bad habits. Another vote for bad habits. I know Crystal said earlier, I was stepping on your toes, feel so seen with these examples. I know I call myself out all the time with these as well. Like, junk food is my weakness. Designing my morning routine, said Kristen. I want this to be sustainable, but also need some quiet time before a tornado toddler wakes up. Love that. Yeah, that comes up a lot with my clients of, okay, I need to set my alarm like 15 minutes before my kids typically get up. But then again, there's the days your kids are going to wake up before you. So then what do we do, right? So that's why I talked about the example of just how do we get even kids on board if they're at the age to understand, of course. With mommy needs her time, or daddy needs their time, like some quiet time in the morning, it's okay. And maybe they want some quiet time too, and they didn't know that was an option. All right, let's move on to our third section here. I know we just mentioned a lot of us feeling called out, and I'm going to apologize in advance. This is probably the section that's going to call everyone out to some degree. And I promise I'm doing it with love and for supporting you. And I resonate with basically all of these as well. So the three different draining habits we'll cover are procrastination, perfectionism, and people pleasing. So when it comes to procrastination, and actually each of these three, I have three different angles or the three common ways I see it show up for people. So again, think about which one of these resonates most with you and how they relate to your work-life balance. So procrastination, I'm sure we're all familiar with it, but generally this means wasting energy and time by avoiding or delaying doing something, typically when you're delaying starting or finishing something. So one style of procrastination I see is the deadline procrastination. This is usually the most common, and how most people refer to it is when you need that deadline in order to finish something and you're waiting until the last 10% of the time to really do the bulk of the work. So if you resonate with that, what helps a lot is using a brain dump to list out all the things that you need to do, like write them all down, and then create milestone deadlines along the way. So you're essentially tricking your brain to think, oh, it's not just one big deadline at the end, but I have these 4 other deadlines to get me there. And it can help motivate you to get started a lot sooner instead of waiting for the last minute. And then we have productive procrastination. This is one of my personal favorites. And that looks like you are putting off doing one specific project by feeling productive doing something entirely different. So for me, if I have a work project or something that I need to be doing, and somehow my house gets super clean because I'd somehow much rather clean my house, and that feels productive, that feels good, right? It's not a bad thing to clean your house, but sometimes we do it as a way to avoid the other thing that is more pressing that we need to be focused on. So here, when you're in that boat, think about identifying your priorities. What is most important? What is most urgent right now? And reclaiming your fears. And what I mean by that is a lot of times if you're in this boat, there's usually some sort of fear of failure or fear of success. And we're avoiding doing the big scary thing because we're afraid we might fail, or what would actually happen if we get the thing, right? Sometimes if I'm doing a big proposal, maybe I'm putting it off a little bit because I'm scared. Oh, wait, what if they actually do hire me and want me to do this thing that I know I would love to do, but is actually, stretching me and is a bit scary. Okay, then last we have distracted procrastination. Another very common one, and this is the typical, instead of doing your work project or instead of focusing on work, you are scrolling TikTok, or instead of going to bed at a reasonable time, you're scrolling TikTok. So social media, number one example I see all the time with my clients. Also, binging TV, like the example earlier, you're watching the latest Netflix show, but you stay up till 1 a.m. watching it. That's the distracted procrastination here. So if you're falling into that, get really clear on what your motivation is actually behind both of them, because sometimes we, grab our phones or we start watching shows and we're not realizing why we're doing that. Like, is it because you're stressed about this project and you're avoiding that feeling of stress, so you want to watch TikTok to feel better? And then what is your motivation for doing the project? Remind yourself why it's so important. That can help motivate you, or what's the what for behind it. And also think about what are helpful activities to refocus instead of the hurtful, distracting, or TikTok typically isn't helpful in general. So what's something that could be more helpful to refocus you? Is it, set a timer for 5 minutes and just stretch? Is it go for a 5-minute walk to just refocus your brain, switch up your energy? Anything like that can be really helpful to then get you to come back and focus on the thing. Instead of, when we pick up our phone and start scrolling, it just ends up being, for most people, way too long. So think about how to limit the distracted time as well. Then we have perfectionism. Perfectionism is when we're wasting time and energy by refusing to accept any standard short of perfection. And this is one of those that a lot of times people think it's really helpful, and it can be helpful to a certain degree. Like, who doesn't want to be perfect at things, right? But most of the time, for most of us, again, I'm calling myself out here, we take it too far, and we are draining ourselves, draining our energy, and most of the time we're giving 110% to literally everything, when maybe 80% is plenty, and maybe our 80% is most people's 100%, right? Think about that. Of sometimes we just need to pull back a little bit to give ourselves that work-life balance, because we're the ones that are actually going a bit overboard. So if you have perfectionism as a way of wanting control and having control, and this usually looks like you need to control every little detail of a plan and all the details of the execution of the plan, something that would be helpful is remind yourself, again, change is inevitable, and ask for help more often. Because again, we get attached to that plan and we want to control every little detail of it. So then when change happens, we tend to blow it up, or we tend to avoid it, or we tend to get way too sucked in and spend way too much energy trying to get things back on track, when really maybe we need help from someone else, and we could get back there a lot easier. Another version of perfectionism I see is perfectionism as a way to win approval. And this is usually where you are showing up as perfect as a way, it's more about your perception externally. So you're kind of putting on a face, making everything seem perfect externally. But what we really need to be doing is getting to know ourselves better so that we can show up more as ourselves and, put that facade down and practice saying no. Because a lot of times this perfectionism, you're just saying yes to everyone. You're being really agreeable to everything as a way to just try to win someone's approval, or you want them to like you more. So you're going above and beyond and doing all of these things that maybe you don't need to be doing. Or again, maybe you don't have to do it right now. Maybe you can push back some deadlines and give yourself more time back. And then lastly, I see perfectionism also, or the other angle, is avoiding negative emotions. So this is kind of that, I call it, toxic positivity, where it kind of combines the first two, where it's more about controlling everything on the inside and the execution of your plan and what you're doing, but then also your perception on the outside has to be perfect, and no one can see that you're struggling, or no one can see how hard you're working. And even just saying that, I'm like, whew, that one's exhausting. That's putting in a lot of energy to try to seem perfect. And when you're trying to avoid these negative emotions, usually you just need to be with your emotions more. So naming the emotions in order to process them and move through them, and even just slowing down to be with your own thoughts more so that you can recognize when these negative emotions are even there, instead of just pushing them down and avoiding them. All right, lastly is overcoming people pleasing. And people pleasing is when we're sacrificing our own well-being while consistently putting others' wants and needs above our own. So the 3 different angles I see here: people pleasing as a way to be liked. This is the most common and most self-explanatory. You're trying to do it for other people to like you. But typically, again, it's hurting you somehow. So remind yourself that what other people think of you is none of your business. And this is, I know, one of those quotes that's like really hard to wrap my head around, or it was when I first heard it. But it seems like it should be your business, but we can't control other people's thoughts or opinions of us, right? We can do our best to make a good impression, but we'll never be able to know exactly what they think or what their opinion is, let alone control it. So just release that burden of yourself and just let that one go. Next is, a lot of times I see people pleasing to keep the peace, where you're trying to maybe jump in and mediate around other people, or you're avoiding conflict, especially in meetings. And this one, it seems like, again, at the surface, it seems like it's really helpful, but sometimes we need conflict. Sometimes conflict can be productive if we're disagreeing about next steps for a project. Sometimes we need to actually talk through it. And sometimes the people in this boat are kind of interrupting that, and they're trying to avoid it entirely. So here we just need to trust ourselves and the people around us to be in discomfort more. No, it's okay if we disagree about something. We can work through it. It's going to be okay. People aren't going to hate you for disagreeing with them, right? We can work through it. And then lastly, people pleasing to make other people comfortable or better off. Here, similar or kind of a combination of the first two, again, is like you're always thinking about other people's needs before your own and trying to make them better off than they were before. And sometimes they might not even know that you're doing it. Like I realized I used to do this a lot, even just driving. I was always thinking about the people driving around me and trying to like accommodate for them instead of thinking about my own safety first and foremost. Like that is dangerous. So I need to stop that. But just think about all the different places in your life. Maybe you're doing that. And for here, think about where you need to create the boundaries for yourself, again, depending on where you're doing it, and check in before taking on new commitments. You know, is this for me? Is this for them? Is this hurting me somehow? And really check in before you're just always giving without either getting anything in return, or again, if it's somehow hurting you. You want to be able to gut check. And of course, we still want to be able to support other people and give to other people, but we need to know when to say no and when we need to invest in ourselves. All right, this is our last section here. So again, page 3 on the handout. Spend a minute or two choosing one of these 3 that would have the most impact on your work-life balance and why. And the 3 options: procrastination, perfectionism, and people-pleasing. And again, I know there's plenty of people that have come in as I was talking, so there are lots of topics I'm going through very quickly here, but there are, in the workbook, there are links to the podcast episodes that go way deeper into each of these topics so that you have even more to go with. Okay, perfectionism. Oh, I love this quote. Seth said, I had a leader say, you don't always need a Ferrari. Sometimes a bicycle will do. And the time and energy it takes to get from 90 to 100% is rarely worth it. I agree. I haven't heard that. Ferrari versus bicycle. I love that. All right, unpacking procrastination, setting mini deadlines to complete a project has tricked my brain. I still get the adrenaline rush to when completing the mini deadlines and still working on people pleasing. Yes. Tina said, overcoming people pleasing to keep the peace and unpacking procrastination. Love it. Thank you all for sharing. And another vote for procrastination. This feels like a good time to admit that I was finalizing these slides last night. So again, calling myself out here too. We all do it. We're all working through it. All right, before we move on to our plan, I wanted to plug a few things before I stop recording as well. So if you love these topics, you want to dig in more, all of these podcast episodes are also on YouTube. So definitely subscribe if you're not yet. And I have the QR codes for both of these on the screen, and I can drop the links in the chat as well. But I also have guided meditations on YouTube. I have some previous webinars from last year. And then I'll also start soon doing mini, like 5-minute leadership trainings as well. And then on the right here, if these are topics, if they're all resonating, if these are all really helpful for you, but they're really hard for you to implement and you want that one-on-one accountability, definitely book a discovery call. Again, I have a few spots available currently for women coaching clients. And again, these are topics coming up every day with my clients that we're working through, and we can really customize it to you if we're working one-on-one. Okay, now let's customize your plan. So you'll see page 4 through 6 in the handout. They're each the same boxes or the same questions, but I want you at the top of page 4, there's a question about choosing the top 3. So based on the 3 sections we went through, You chose one topic in each section. Now I want you to prioritize those three. So of the three, which is the most important that you want to start right away? And we'll put that as number one. And then, 2 and 3 are the least priority, lower priorities. And we're going to spend a few minutes now filling out just the first page. And I'll give you a few minutes to reflect on this. And then we'll open it up to questions. And obviously I'll be here for the next 15 minutes or so. And you can keep filling out page 5 and 6 if you have more time. I wanted to give you kind of the flexibility to either do at least the first one right here while we're live, but then also if you want to keep going and do all three, definitely recommend that. But essentially you're just filling in which of these is your top priority. And I think of this as like the accountability plan. So this is kind of what we do together in a coaching session of, your commitments and the accountability plan for you of, okay, you chose a priority. When are you going to start working on it? Which technique are you going to choose to focus on? Which of the bullets under that topic is the most important to you? How are you going to apply it? So how can you make it measurable? What needs to change? Where in your life or work are you going to be applying it? And how can you remember it? How can we get really detailed with this? Because again, I'm throwing a lot of ideas at you and I want you to really customize it for you. And then the bottom half is really the accountability. Who's your accountability buddy? When or how often are you going to check in with them and on what specifically? And then the last piece, how will you track your progress? So is this something maybe in your notebook? Is there a certain app you can use, a planner, notes app, a shared Google sheet, something like that? And while you're on the call and while you're watching this, set it up now. Like grab that notebook, start writing in it, put it on your calendar, put a reminder in your phone, whatever it is. I want you to do it now to get you set up. This is the biggest piece I see people missing is when they do sessions like this. Sure, we have a great workbook, I'm filling it out, and then you leave it in your Google Drive and never look at it again. So I want you to graduate it from your Google Drive or from your printout into your real life, somewhere you will see it and not forget it. That is accountability number one. So if you do nothing else, do that right now. I will stop talking for a few minutes to give you time to answer these and reflect on this. Oh, hey, Crystal, I see you have your hand up. What's up?
Yes, so here I am trying to not be a perfectionist. So let's manage myself. So I'm on topic one, second question. When will you start working on this? My gut went with immediately now, but then that goes with the whole um making sure I don't even know how do you decide when to start working on any of this?
Yeah, that's a fair question. And I added that, I think mostly because the next two, I want you to space these out. And actually, thank you for asking this because I forgot to mention for each topic, I'd love for you to commit to it for about 1 month before you add another one. That'll give you the time to really, get in the habit of it and make it more normalized and kind of work through the kinks before you add a bunch more. Because again, I'm basically give you 27 specific tips today, and that's like way too many to start all right now. So yeah, topic one, start it right now. If you're ready, do it. And then I'd say the next ones, wait a month or so at least, probably to work through the first one.
Thank you.